Hello, everybody. Hello. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome to Saturday at PAX East. Excellent. Man, y'all are so much more subdued than our Thursday crowd.
Because it's Saturday at PAX East.
Yeah, are you just a little bit more tired? Maybe not. Anybody else get kicked out of the hall at midnight last night when they closed it? Yeah, it's a good time. The goal is to play games, right? That's why we're here. So welcome to Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Dragons. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer. I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I work with the nonprofit Take This. So Take This was the first mental health and games-focused nonprofit to form. We serve both the gaming industry as well as the games community. You can find us here at PAX East. We are running both of the Take This AFK room, which is a quiet, staffed, supportive space, intentionally the most boring room in the convention. The lights are also a much more reasonable level if you are trying to just get a little bit away from some of the sensory overwhelm of the convention. We also have our Hope booth where you can learn a little bit more about Take This as well and the work that we do in the industry. So I would love to get started by having our wonderful panelists introduce themselves today. So I'm asking people to tell us your name, your role, your organization, a little bit about you, and how long you've been playing TTRPGs of any kind.
Me?
Yeah.
Who starts? Okay. I didn't want to assume. I was like, I'm glad that I can see your screen so I can actually remember what I'm supposed to say. I'm Danny Donovan. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and CEO of the Anti-Boring Project, the creator and self-publisher of the Anti-Planner, How to Get Shit Done When You Don't Feel Like It. And I am known in the ADHD community for my ADHD comic series and TikToks and trolley ADHD tweets. I have been playing TTRPGs for 9 years. And then when you received your ADHD diagnosis, is that part of these two?
You can absolutely answer that now.
Okay, I received my ADHD diagnosis when I was 19, and I went to college, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is way harder than it was before. Turns out feeding yourself is hard, so that's my...
That's a mood. That doesn't stop in college. Hi, I'm John Mendoza. I am a post-grad therapist working primarily with kids on the spectrum and with ADHD. I am also a freelance tabletop designer, writer, AP performer, and producer, as well as a theater director and performer as well. I've been playing TTRPGs for, dear God, 20 years now, something like that. And my pronouns are any, and especially the one you thought of right now. Because I can't pick.
Hello, I'm Chrissy Kritz. What were the questions? So my pronouns are she, they, she, her, whichever you prefer. How long have I been playing TTRPGs? I have it sitting on my phone too, by the way. It's right in front of me. I started when I was a kid. And then I took a big long break, and then I came back to the TTRPG scene right around 2010. So it's been a hot minute. And ADHD diagnosis, when did I get mine? I was little, and then retested again in adulthood, because why not? Question mark, I guess. So that's that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So just a little bit more about me before we get started. So I started playing TTRPGs about a decade ago, right when I started graduate school. I was lucky enough to have some good friends who were very, very welcoming into this world. It was super exciting to get to start. And in graduate school, alongside my partner, both of us started using TTRPGs in therapy spaces. So I started working with children who'd experienced trauma. He started working with military veterans. Both of us got the chance over time to work with all sorts of groups, including military vets, a lot of adolescents and adults. A lot of who we work with is late diagnosed ADHD and autism, because you can be smart and good at school and also have ADHD. It turns out, shocking news, I know. And we found that ADHD can be such a powerful tool for supporting people's growth, supporting working on skills in a way that isn't just like awful and boring and repetitive. And so we've been doing this panel for a while, and one of the things that I really love, I think I have all new panelists this time, which is very exciting. One of the things that we love getting to talk about is how ADHD can be so good and so exciting for individuals with ADHD. So the first question I'd like to ask y'all is, do you have any stories of encounters, characters, whatever, that highlights a really neat and validating way your ADHD has kind of shown up at the game table?
I don't want to start every question. Let's go that way.
You spoke first. You get to start now.
No, I need to think.
You've got to play the dodging game where we all just look at each other very quietly and try to figure out what's going on.
All right. You want to start?
Okay. So the first thing that pops into my head, I am part of right now on a streaming channel called Crits and Giggles. We have been playing a 5-year-long, it was a COVID inception story. We have been playing a 5-year-long Tyranny of Dragons, all the way through like the Horde of the Dragon Queen, like all the way from start to finish. We just hit level 19 recently, so like we're like high level game, right? I know people are nodding, and it's like, yes, very good. But our first game, we were level 1, and I am in that game playing a character called Ulta Cragmaw, and she is 3 foot tall kobold who stormed, like we were sitting in a keep somewhere, hold up, and people were like, there's a half dragon out there. And like the team was like, we're gonna do an aerial assault. And I was like, guys, I'm walking outside. And they were like, what? And I just kind of like, this tiny little thing just strolled up. And he was like, are you challenging me? And I was like, oh no, I might have made a mistake. But then it ended up being really cool because as far as that validation and stuff like that, that kind of impulsive action of just like, we've been talking about doing this for too long, somebody has to pull the trigger. Me doing that and kind of pulling on some of this like energy that I had to get it out. Like we were just sitting in the same spot for so long, I was like, my wheels were turning. So I just ran out, did the things, and at the end of it, we ended up getting a bunch of accolades in the game, and like the DM handled it really well. But it also felt really good inside because it was one of those moments where at some tables, and I know that's part of the conversation later probably, is like sometimes that's not very welcome at tables, that kind of impulsive and reactive behavior.
Yeah, I can go. So my experience I was going to talk about was I made a character named Riley for Monster of the Week, and so it was really fun because I decided to kind of make her like 19, and she had an experience where her like sister had gotten bitten by like a werewolf or something, and so I did everything I could to like learn everything about werewolves, which turned into like a hyperfixation in like learning about any and all monsters. And then I started like a YouTube channel essentially where I was like Velma for like but very kind of like in my head about stuff. But what was great is that I had all of this like energy and knowledge in this very specific area, but then it didn't apply to any actual real world like application of fighting monsters. But I was like so confident because I'd done all that. I'm like, I know everything there is to know. And so it was really fun because I got to explore this tendency I think I have to get really, really into something and not just learn about it, but share it with the world. And so it was fun to kind of be able to bring that into a character.
Real quick, I don't know if anyone else is hearing their own voice back at them.
Yes.
Cool. I'm also distracted by that. Anyway,
Yep.
But I think for me, one of the things that was really great as a player was I had a GM we were playing a system that he was really huge fan of. It's called 13th Age, if anyone knows of it. And there is a particular class in that game whose mechanical benefits are all interrupting other people's turns.
Oh my God. Love.
So anytime someone rolls like an odd number, I'm like, I have a thing for that. Wait a minute. And the reason I found out about this class is because he would watch me like essentially learn everybody's characters by default just by listening to what they were doing and being like, oh, I would, okay. And he was like, hey, I think I have a thing you would enjoy. Like, just be, if you want to just like, because your turn comes and you're like, bam, done, anyway, and then you go back to watching what everyone else is doing. And so that was the build. I forget what exactly the class is off the top of my head. Woo, this panel. But it was basically built to just do reactively to helping other people make what they were doing better. And also, whenever they failed, roles being like, no, you didn't, actually. You get this instead. And that was, I think, probably one of the most validating things as a player, to be like, hey, there's something that you were doing that would be really cool, and there is something for that I know that you don't. You should take a look at it.
These are great stories, and I think you've kind of already answered some of my next question, which is about aspects of your identity or your experience that might be more welcome in a TTRPG than they are in the real world, because I'm hearing that a lot in terms of the theme of like, oh, well, I got to be really impulsive because I was done waiting, and even a long time, or this was an aspect that I was able to actually pull in a really mechanical way, and I love that. Are there any characters or other experiences that you feel like really encapsulate a way in which like your impulsivity or challenge remembering or whatever that looks like, executive dysfunction even, can kind of show up in a game in a way that is really validating?
I'll say that like what I really loved is feeling, I always think that I don't like mask at all because I'm like very, like being vulnerable is like my whole shtick, right? And I realized though that in real life I have these like with emotional dysregulation, I have especially anger comes up and my body's like not safe. Like do not, I did get very good at like suppressing that at the expense of like the potential for being rejected, or I'm worried if I get mad at them that they're gonna be mad at me for being mad at them. And so I find that one of the things that I'm able to do is like when my character gets angry to be able to like fully express that in a way that feels safe, in a way that like the real world does not feel like a safe place for me to like let some of my like real unfiltered feelings be as big and as loud as I would if I truly didn't have any kind of filter. And so being able to, I think, yeah, like explore those elements because they make the story better, right? They make the story more dramatic. They make everything feel more real. And so being able to, yeah, really lean into that emotional dysregulation as a plot device is fun.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is that it's not just that those pieces in a TTRPG are tolerated.
Yes.
Is that they're welcome.
They're welcome, and they are I would say the space that I don't really get anywhere else. And I've experienced that with also, like Werewolf isn't like a TTRPG, but like social deduction games where like accusing people, like all of these behaviors that would like not be acceptable to express in other areas, you have the like consent of everyone playing to pretend something that you wouldn't really be able to in other aspects of life.
And I'm assuming like in most aspects of life, it both wouldn't be acceptable for you to, for example, like punch someone in the face, but also you wouldn't necessarily want to deal with those consequences at least.
Yeah.
And so having this like kind of fun game space where it is safe, especially with TTRPGs, you also have so much flexibility around like who's the bad guy, right? I learned that when you play with 10 to 13-year-olds, they are the most violent and vicious population. Played with a lot of military vets, they got nothing on the descriptions that 12-year-olds will talk about in terms of how they violently murder. And so with my younger players, we tend to do a lot of like constructs. One of my favorite was we had this giant guano monster, so like a giant bat poop construct, because you can eviscerate that however you want, and your parents won't get mad at me. Kind of having that outlet, that's awesome.
I think one of my favorite things was I was watching, like, especially because I also do like social groups with younger kids, but watching what they've picked up from like the things that they are consuming rapidly around them and being like, I want to try this here in a place where no one's gonna judge me, and that thing they want to do is, my parents were watching Breaking Bad. I want to make jungle crack. And you go, what? And I'm like, okay, what is that? They're like, it's blue and sugary. And I was like, those are pixie sticks, but okay. Like,
Rock candy, got it.
yeah, got
Rock
it. Okay,
candy.
Jesus. But like, I think it's one of those things of like being able to express the like, I have an impulse, this, and everyone goes, huh? But like, that's it. Which was just like, ugh. But that's my favorite.
So this is related, but kind of not. So, here we are. I'm the worst note taker in any game. Like, you don't want to see them. It's like the date, half of the character name written down, doodling. There's like sometimes a note that says like, pink fingernail, and people are like, what does that mean? And I'm like, you know what I mean? Or there's a name that I've made up where it's like Steve Johnson, and they're like, his name was Lance, and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Not anymore.
So as much as it can be kind of like a pain for the table sometimes, right? They have kind of embraced this behavior from me in a way that's like very, you were kind of talking about safe and accepting. And so when we talk about my notes or we talk about like the game itself, they have learned to kind of adapt to some of my little weirdnesses and things like that. And I've adapted back. So like sometimes I will catch myself like, I'll write like Steve ? So I know that like at the end of the game, I should probably double check if what was that dude's name? Like, was that his name, or did I get that wrong again? So what I really, really love and feel good about and safe and comfortable in the spaces I go to is because I can talk about this stuff. And I can share with the people around me, like, hey, this is like a thing that I can't quite control fully. And I will do my best to make sure that I'm appropriate at the table, but feel free to help work with me, and I'll do my best. And I think the kind of like collaboration of it all is one of my absolute favorites of TTRPGs, and also having like this part of my identity.
Absolutely, and you brought up this really important point in terms of feeling safe enough at the table that you're playing with to ask for those accommodations and to say, hey, this is a thing that I'm struggling with. I realize it may negatively impact gameplay, so how do we as a table want to deal with that? I know some of us have talked a little bit before around like how we can add those pieces into characters. We often think about metagaming as like, oh, I as a player know that like this is what this monster is and this is what it's weak to, but my character wouldn't know that, so I'm not gonna bring that into the game. But we can also do that with other pieces as well. So maybe if you are awful at note-taking or remembering names, that's not just a player thing, that's a character piece as well. Like, and is that a bummer when your character doesn't remember stuff? Absolutely. Is that going to make certain aspects of the game potentially harder? Sure. And having, I think, that freedom to go like, okay, do I want to have a character that is terrible at taking notes and remember things and get to just kind of lean into that? Or do I want to have a character that's average at taking notes and remembering things, and I, as the player, will get to look at the notes of my fellow players. Like we have collaborative notes. And so having those opportunities of, do I want this real world challenge to be something that's reflected in the game? Or do I want this real world challenge to be something that's accommodated for in the game? Can be really empowering for players.
I was gonna say, I take obsessive notes because I can't remember anything. And that's always kind of been my thing is I'm like, I'm gonna say ashamed to forget, but like, what is that again? Where are we going again? Especially when we hadn't, had long gaps between playing, and I'd need to like refresh on what it even was that we were trying to do. And so I had a player in my last D&D game who was essentially like I play a lot of like younger characters, but tiny like 12-year-old Sherlock Holmesy type character. And people are like, oh, Enola Holmes. I'm like, I don't know what that is. is that a show? And I went and watched it. I was like, oh man, I thought it was cool and original. But like part of her whole thing is like taking like meticulous notes and always going up and like asking people questions and like doing the thing. And so I sort of turned like, I need you to be very specific about what is going on so that I can document it into my character. So that was one of the, I would say, the flip side of, I know that Josh has said like, oh, I'm forgetful, and that's gonna end up being funny because I made a decision that if I would have remembered what happened, wouldn't have happened. And then I'm on the flip side of the, how do I overcompensate, is like turning it into a character trait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally half the characters I play are wildly super not here half the time, and then we'll hear something that's related, they'll be like, thing, and then immediately go back to doing whatever it was they were doing in their head. Yeah, mood. I do the exact opposite of you do. I take no notes, and I pay attention to nothing until someone's like, special interest, and I'm like, that's the one, I'm here.
I'm like, I need to get an A in TTRPG, so.
So
What if I
I
failed
said to somebody yesterday, they were teaching me a game, and I said, I'm gonna be really honest with you. I'm here for a fun time, not a smart time. So like, we're gonna need to like, really work with me here. And she was like, good to know. I was like, thank you.
So I'm curious for y'all if you ever feel like you don't belong at the table. And so obviously our focus on this panel is ADHD, but I want to invite you to talk about intersectional identities as well, because that's always going to influence. None of us are like just ADHD in a flesh suit. So
That would make things somehow easier?
I have an answer, but I keep going first. Okay, all right. I guess it would be worse to go first if I didn't have an answer. So I will say that like I have played with like a bunch of different games with a bunch of different dynamics, and the last game that I played, I did not have a good experience with, and I was the like only woman there, and I was working, which it isn't unusual for me, and I hadn't felt this way with other groups, so I'm not trying to be like, this happens all the time, but everyone also like was just like a guy who worked in tech, and I experienced this thing where I was being like talked over a lot, which anyone who knows me, I am not someone who is easy to talk over. And I understood that I was like, oh, my character, oh, you're not listening to me because it's my character. Oh, no one's listening to me because it's my character. Oh, no one's doing this because it's my character. And eventually I was like, but they're not, though. I have now realized that this is just actually happening. And I had a like uncomfortable conversation where I'm like, this is not fun for me, actually. Like not being listened to or considered when I am having a lot of good ideas, because I wrote everything down. So I know where we should go, and but I would say like everybody else at the table also had ADHD, and so like I can't say like for I would say certain that I just had that experience because I'm a woman, but I feel deep down like it probably didn't help. I don't know.
I mean, probably.
It was just, yeah. It was
all
just
seems to kind of funnel.
It was just a dynamic, because again, and I understand, my husband was one of, like, I am married to tech, how I say, to tech man. But I'm like, I don't mean to offend fellow, but it was just one where, and now I've worked with him, and it's a completely different landscape of how people are used to talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I had not experienced that landscape, and I was like, this is not, I'm used to being on like graphic design, teams, and I was not used to, that sort of dynamic. Okay, I want to be done talking now.
Well, and there's that space we find a lot when we're thinking about individuals who hold any kind of minoritized identity, where even if what is happening is not like a microaggression because of the identity itself, you're still having to run through this script in your head where you're like, okay, is this because of my gender, or is this because of my disability, or is this because of my race, or is this because of whatever? And that's still putting a lot of extra effort on you. And so people might have been doing it for totally other reasons. Maybe they just all didn't like you, which seems unlikely, but maybe that's
I'm a
why.
fucking delight. No, I'm just kidding.
but that will keep.
That's our one. That's all we get.
No, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they don't like me. No.
I mean, to be fair, that was a good
There's
one.
still that extra effort in that script that you have to be running through.
Yeah.
That covered it for me, so.
I think I'm the most successful at tables that are diverse. Like truly and authentically, like whatever the person sitting at the table or the people sitting at the table with me embody, if there are more things represented, the safer I feel, because then I feel a little bit more comfortable and safer representing myself authentically. So I think that's where I've been the most successful, and the least successful probably mirrors something similar that you were talking about, is when it is a very limited group of people with very limited perspectives or experiences or identities themselves. Sometimes that gets really hard because it's, for me, about, do I have to hide parts of myself? So I love when a table looks just as weird as I do, because that's usually when they're the best and most successful. If they look, I'm gonna say a weird thing, but like if they look too middle-aged white man, most of the time, I'm sorry to the middle-aged white man, I promise it's not specific. I know I saw 2 hands, but like sometimes, I know, I'm sorry.
It's not the ones who are in this panel.
I promise.
Because you clearly care.
Yeah, I promise. It's not specific to any one person. Usually those are the ones where I've struggled the most, because sometimes they struggle with me, not just me struggling with them, you know? It's definitely, I play a part in it.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a couple of themes here. One is just kind of table fit itself. So not even necessarily something that someone is doing to you, or saying like, oh, you don't belong here. You haven't, read enough of the player's handbook or whatever. But also that space around, do I feel comfortable showing up as my whole self? Am I able to kind of engage more authentically, especially in a game where like role-playing games are inherently pretty vulnerable. I know that you might show up and you might be like, my character is totally different from me. There's no part of my character that is the same as me. You can make those characters, but you are still the person playing that character. And we tend to end up sharing stuff about ourselves that we might not share otherwise, because we have this kind of presumed safety of this kind of like magic circle game space, right? Where it is you but not you. It's one of the reasons why it can be so powerful as a therapy tool, because if you don't want to sit around with a group of strangers and talk about your feelings, you can still do therapy through D&D. To be clear, do not do therapy on your friends. Do not join a game group and decide this is going to be therapy. I'm talking about therapy spaces where we've all consented, we all know what's going on, you have a trained facilitator.
You are all therapists now.
No, the opposite of that.
No.
Is the opposite
That was
of
the
that.
point of this. Sorry.
You're good. It's clearly a joke. But having that opportunity to get to test out some of that vulnerability can be incredibly powerful. I've had amazing breakthroughs in those spaces, and also opportunities for people to share parts of their identity they might have otherwise not been comfortable with. I've had a number of players who said like, here's my character, and their pronouns are different than the pronouns you know me from. And then they look around the group, and they're like, okay, everybody seems to not care about this. And then 1 to 3 weeks later, they'll often come in and they'll be like, so actually, my pronouns are the same as my character's pronouns.
The number of trans people I know who found out by playing Catgirls in Final Fantasy XIV. All of them.
Yeah. So play spaces, right? TTRPGs are play spaces. Play spaces allow us to get to try out things about ourselves and learn things about ourselves and better understand ourselves. And TTRPGs, these structured games, are the kinds of play spaces that adults get, right? Kids get to play just like general fantasy games in the schoolyard or in the backyard or in the woods or wherever they are. And sometimes that kind of extra structure helps us as adults get to engage and connect with that same kind of play. So I want to ask y'all, what is something that you have discovered about yourself through playing TTRPGs?
Wow.
I didn't put that question on the list of questions that I
about
got
to say,
beforehand.
I'm like, oh, no,
that's
I
why.
literally
I'm
was like, was that on
unprepared.
the list?
3 people, did we forget?
Well, it's hard. No, it's I'm like the thing that I'm instantly thinking about, and I was like, no, I'm still gonna have this count, which is from Baldur's Gate, but
It
which
still
is
counts. It still
essentially
counts.
one-player D&D, and so I had a character because I always tend to make characters who feel and act like me because it's easy, and even if I don't start out that way, I accidentally slip into it because I'm like, no, I just want to be me on 200%, and so I found though through making this character and going to friends that was the last like Mexico retreat with Dusty, where they did a thing on exploring different aspects of your identity through this kind of stuff, and me realizing like my character has like gradient colored hair, and I love it so much, and I'm playing it, and I had always played like ranger human with brown hair, and now I'm like, okay, no, this is getting more and more imaginative. Like I have to allow myself to step outside of what I think I was just so comfortable with. And then the more I kind of thought about it, I'm like, do I want gradient hair? I do want gradient hair. I keep hearing my parents in the back of my head being like, you're not gonna get a job. And I'm like, I'm a CEO. Like, what am I doing? I could totally dye my hair. And then it's like, oh, well, I might not get to, maybe someone wouldn't take me seriously enough to like put me on a panel. And I'm like, and then I was telling him, I was like, you know what, if somebody doesn't want to work with me because I have a hair color that they don't like, I don't want to work with them anyway. And now it's not a matter of like, oh, I'm not doing it because I don't want to do it. It's just that I suck at making hair appointments because of ADHD. So.
Also, it costs a lot.
Yeah, and it's the maintenance and the upkeep, because then you have to have the appointment. This is a whole separate thing. But
Or you can just do it yourself in your bathroom and hope for the
that
best.
is true.
Purple
With
shampoo
gradients,
Okay,
though.
that's a different level.
Anyway, it was just one of those things where like I had never thought to myself that this, like, it seemed like something I had literally been conditioned to not want because of like fear of my parents' boomer fear of not being taken seriously. And so, but through the game and through those types of conversations where I sort of realized that like, oh, this is something that like I think I would like, and I wouldn't have thought about it if I hadn't been playing this game.
This is both a tabletop and sort of then later on video game or role-playing related thing. But there was a while, like 3.5 D&D, where I was sitting down going, okay, we're just cycling through characters, we're doing a good time. None of this is really clicking well. I don't know if anybody relates to the first time they discovered Goblin was a playable race. Ancestry. And I was like, ooh. And then about, 15 years later, I was playing Final Fantasy XIV. And I was playing a normal human because I do that just to kind of get a sense when I want to see what's going on before I pick something. And then I was like, what are these little tiny things running around? Oh, I'm a Lalafell now, okay. So a lot of I was like, the acceptance of the gremlin energy was very much in those two pieces, much to the chagrin of my partner.
I think one of the biggest things I've learned about myself is that I can commit to things, which is extremely difficult for me. So I am like, what is that phrase? I'm gonna botch it, and everyone's gonna be like, "You got that so wrong." Like a jack of all trades, master of none. Is that how you say it? Oh,
You did not botch that.
I didn't botch it. So like, I feel like sometimes I have 1.5 million hobbies, or like I'll get tired of doing one hobby, and then I'm like, I'm gonna take up belly dancing, or like whatever it is, which I've done. You know what I mean? But TTRPGs are a space that I like showed up. And because it was so accepting and it was so open for me, that I've actually stuck it out. Like, it still to this day, like we were just talking about it, when I show up every other Thursday to play that 5-year-long Tyranny of Dragons campaign, I'm floored that I'm like still doing it and that we're like level 19 and I'm about to like play a big, like we're doing the things. Because usually I probably would have quit after like 5 or 6 months of kind of getting bored or stale with something. And I've realized I can like commit and be present a lot more than I gave myself credit for, I think.
That's awesome. Since I jumped this question on y'all with no notice, I will also answer it myself. So I think I discovered a little bit almost the opposite. So I also am a serial hobbyist, and I'm very grateful for Kate Osborne several years ago making some content about how like collecting hobbies is also a hobby in and of itself,
Yes.
and you're like allowed to do that. So now my guidelines are just like I try and have as much fun while spending as little money as possible. Doesn't mean no money, but like that's my guideline. But I have spent so much time working so hard to like be responsible and prove that I can be responsible and like prove that I can follow through and that I can finish things. And it is probably a huge part of what led me to get my PhD. And I was so scared of like falling behind that I finished a year early because I didn't pay enough attention and I took too many classes because I was so worried that I would like not take enough or I'd like mess up or something. And getting to play D&D and getting to play both as a GM, as a player, made me realize how much I miss getting to like just be impulsive instead of having to try and be so responsible all the time. And so having that opportunity, and then also getting to take that and go, oh, D&D is not the only safe space to be impulsive. Obviously, there are unsafe spaces to be impulsive. I shouldn't drive 150 miles an hour. Probably a bad idea, right?
But the Autobahn.
It's not a good idea for me anywhere, let's be honest.
That's fair.
So having that has like really pushed me in the last couple of years to look for safe spaces to get to kind of be impulsive and get to be silly and get to be fun. And that has been really, really huge for me as well. So kind of pulling off of some of what we talked about earlier, I'm curious, like, how do you know that a table or a game is going to be a good fit for you? We've talked a little bit about how important it is that it's diverse and that there's inclusivity at the table, but I'm curious if there are any like play styles or mechanics or types of games that you're like, oh man, this works really well for my brain, or this doesn't.
So I will say that I think this kind of also touches on a later thing about like tools at the table that are helpful. I think for me, it's if players are willing to be generous in helping support each other through the things that like everyone is struggling with. So I walk into a room and someone's like, oh yeah, we have a shared Google Doc for note-taking. Great. I will read that. But the fact that like, I think just the expressiveness and the openness of being able to say, we have some tools here that are clearly meant for people who are bad at this specific thing to be able to kind of hitch onto and latch onto in case you need that help. Has been super helpful in that regard to kind of find, like, okay, we're all a little bit more collaborative as players, even if our characters don't get along very well at the start, which is fine.
I'm going to use it's probably going to sound really generic, but I truly do believe in it, is like any DM or table that I sit at that is willing to use safety tools is a space that I will show up authentically at. Like if a DM will show up and immediately is like, we don't deal with safety tools here. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna be weird the whole time. I think that for me is just a good sign of willingness to accept people exactly where they're at, but also understand that like there are boundaries within some of these spaces. And I appreciate that always, because if within like a lot of those different safety tools are spaces for me to say, hey, this neurodivergence of mine, or hey, this personality trait, or hey, this thing that happened to me, I don't want this to happen in a game. Hey, whatever it is. I really just love a good safety tool.
Well, and safety tools are kind of part of the basic construct of, hey, I respect you and I'm willing to like listen and I want to make sure this is a good time for you. Safety tools can be really complex, and you can have all sorts of checklists and you can have all sorts of like little tokens and stuff that people flip over, and that's awesome. But at its core, safety tools are basically like, hey, do you have a way to speak up when things are happening in the game that you are no longer okay with, or that is making this game not fun for you? And if your DM looks at you and goes, no, I don't want you to have the ability to speak up and tell me when you are uncomfortable at my table, I would highly recommend against playing at that table. So what we often find, like people go like, oh, safety tools feel really overwhelming. It can just be, hey, I have a checklist of the things I don't want to come up. Can we keep this at a PG rating? Can I flip over a card and can we pause the game if things get overwhelming? It does not have to be complicated.
Yeah, and on sort of a secondary bit of that, because I LARP a bunch too, and a lot of those safety tools have come over from that sort of community as well. It is okay when I see a game that has like content warnings or anything, just like says stuff, and being like, that's not for me, actually.
That's
And
why
what
content warnings exist, so that you can go, no, thank you.
actually, I'm good. But like the ability to be able to make that choice from an informed perspective is like really important, because then I can be like, oh, that sounds like a great game for someone who isn't me right now. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Please have someone who will actually enjoy this sit down instead.
Yeah.
I have like 4 answers, so I'm gonna try and pick one. It might turn into 2.
That's fine.
But one of the things, my first experience with TTRPGs, which was like 9 years ago, was my husband's like coworker was doing it, and it was Pathfinder, and he was the type of DM where we were walking around and they were like he was describing it, and there were snow drifts, and Josh was like, I dive headfirst into the snow drift, and he was like, you hit a rock, -2, like he was very, indeed. He found out that we were so much not having fun, because it was very much like, I want to do this by the book, like do not go off over here, we are here, and I want to get from here to there. And so we weren't having very much like fun with it as much as we wanted to, and so we started like a side game, and then he found out that we had a different game, and then he stopped talking, like literally stopped talking to us, which fine, I will live, but it's one where the game that we turned into, the flexibility of the story is not something that everybody wants to do. There are ones where people are like, I want to get through the book, or like, I want to see where this story ends up. And then there are other tables where it's like, what ended up happening in one of our other games where it was the same one, the side game. We stopped this like, drug ring that was using like child labor, and Josh and another character went off and were like, you know what, we are going to pay everybody a living wage and keep this running and not tell anybody. And then like the DM was like, okay. And so like the entire, like we really kind of like rolled with it, and it turned into a different storyline than what we had planned out. And again, it makes sense for some people to that not be their jam, but like exploring the characters and the dynamics and getting to a place that truly feels like we built a story together are the types of games I really like enjoy being in. But it's, again, not everybody's cup of tea.
I love that answer though, because I think it makes me think of the spaces that I've been in where like when the DM does the like roll with the resistance thing, like when a DM can see that the table really wants to go one way instead of just railroading the table. Those are the spaces that I think sometimes I feel the most comfortable in. Like, please just go with us versus forcing us to go with you sometimes. Sometimes, obviously, it's like wrangling cats. So you need someone wandering around, kind of following you around. But
authority issues kick in. I'm like, now I feel like I'm being told what to do.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. No.
I will be going in a different direction now.
Stop me.
But once we kind of get to a place, or like I've sat at tables where we're all like, oh no, like we're gonna do this thing instead, and instead of the DM being like, that's not the story I want to tell, going back to the beginning, I guess, that more collaborative space.
Yeah. So I'm hearing kind of across all of us that we tend to really like story or narrative-driven games that are also really collaborative in terms of the directions they head. And maybe our GMs are really good at going like, oh, you want to go left instead of right? And then in their head, they're like, I'm taking what was right and I'm putting it over on the left, right? But you still have that kind of sense of autonomy and control, as well as games that allow for some flexibility and maybe a little bit more kind of stories versus rules-focused.
I will say that I am also a little weird that I do love a rules-focused game, but I have to be in a very specific mood for that. Like, there is a very big difference between a whole bunch of us sitting down to play like Good Society, which is literally nothing but us just try and vibe and figure out what we're doing, or like being like, okay, I have hyper-focused and read all of Lancer in 3 hours. Let's go, right? But I think really what it boils down to is that thing we're talking about of like being able to tell people what kind of experience you want to run and what you want to do, both as a player and as a GM, having that self sort of awareness of what it is you're looking for. Because I do not want to play at a Lancer table with people who do not want to play Lancer. that's fine. We can do something else. I will find people who want to play Lancer. We will do it. I have found two. I have found 2 people who want to play Lancer. But you
3.
get to,
You found 3.
yes!
This is what PAX is for, everybody.
But that's the goal, is like you want to be able to, wow, be able to. Whew, okay. It's good to be able to have the choice to be like, this is the experience I am currently interested in having, which I think all those tools are essentially being, you can kind of pick where you are at that day, where you're at in that particular sense.
I will say, because I was like, oh yeah, I like when we're able to go off to the side a little bit, and then I go, but also I have been to the extreme of this, where it's like I feel like everything is chaos and nothing matters, and like we're being, like it was like destabilizing to the point of like me not having fun because it felt like no one was taking it seriously. But the thing is, I'm like, they're having fun. They would love this game without me here. Like, what's happening is, like, you guys want to run a very, like, we are, I don't say like trolling, but like
They're just cats.
It's like, let's do the
They're cats in IKEA.
which I love for a good plot point, or I love every once in a while, but it was like every single thing. What's the most ridiculous way that we could go into this? And it did make, like, that much of it did make it to the point of being like unenjoyable for me. And I realized, I'm like, all right, so there are extremes of this, and like if you guys are having fun, that's great, and you could totally continue to play this game, but this is actually not the table I want to be at, I'm realizing. And that doesn't mean that they're playing wrong. It just means that, like, again, that's not a good fit.
Absolutely. So we've got a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure that we leave some time for questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and try and formulate it now. I do ask, I know that this is an ADHD panel. I'm assuming a lot of our audience is here for a reason. I'm going to ask that you keep your question to like a couple of sentences. So now is not the time for stories. I highly encourage you to write your question down. We're going to end with some final advice before we move to questions, but you can go ahead and be formulating those right now. So for my panelists, what is one final piece of advice you would like to give our attention deficit hyperactivity dragons in the crowd today?
If you play online and you see a player looking at their webcam like this, and then eventually you see them do this, they're on their second monitor, it's fine, they're still here. And I think just being like, hey, you checking in? You good? Extremely helpful. Be like, oh, yes, I'm closing the YouTube. I'm back. I'm here. Thank you very much.
I guess I would say, like, one piece of advice is it's okay to take up space, right? Like, I think sometimes it's hard to balance. Like, and for myself, I've heard a lot of, like, struggle with balance. Like, I want some of that chaos, but it can't be too much. I want some of this, but not too much. So I really would tell folks, like, it's okay to take up space, but make sure you're doing it in a way that's, like, supportive of what you're doing at that table, and folks are okay with what's happening. Like, I do a lot of communication with players and co-players as a player at a table or a DM, and it's okay to talk to people and say, hey, I'm gonna do, like, the one wacky thing. You don't gotta tell them what the wacky thing is, but I'm gonna do the wacky thing. And they could be like, hold on, give me 2 seconds. Let me do the serious mission story driving thing first before you go do that wacky thing. And it's really helpful that way. So take up space and communicate. I think that would probably be mine.
I guess my final bit was that I really thought that most, I would say not most, I can't make any assumptions about gigantic groups of people, but I, for a very long time, thought that TTRPGs were like all like D&D Pathfinder, you know. I did not realize that I played a Fate game that was like super roleplay intensive versus combat driven, and I loved it. And I got to explore my character, and I got to like have these and I was playing I was in character and playing the entire time. I was never waiting for somebody else's like turn, which I loved. Or we did, you know, Monster of the Week, which was episodic. So like if we missed one, or I forgot, we were like it didn't, you know, derail the game. Or like we played Alice is Missing, and that was super fun. But I had never done like a one shot before, and it was so pretty much like I didn't realize how much variety there was in games and how much the different the diversity of what experiences those are like can lead to. So my advice is to, if you haven't tried different systems, to consider exploring them.
I want to recommend asking people for feedback. Safe people, right? Safe people that you like and you trust to give feedback well. But sometimes we do stuff that can be really annoying and can really derail games. And that is okay. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't get to play games or we shouldn't play games with people. But there may be some stuff that we do that is relatively easy to change and may really dramatically impact how much some of our most loved, cared for people want to or are able to play with us. And so having that feedback about like, hey, what are the things that work really well when we play together versus what are the things that are really hard for you to manage when we play together can be really, really helpful in terms of increasing that cohesion and also helping you understand why someone might be frustrated or might have a hard time playing with you regularly. All right, so we are gonna jump in to questions. I will let people know, I'm sure we won't get through all of the questions. Our panelists will be out in the hallway afterwards. Please let us leave the room so that we don't get in trouble with the enforcers because we're trying to make an A at PAX this year. But we'll answer as many questions as we can and then we will move out into the hallway. But thank you all so much for coming and joining us today.
Thank you. You want to take a Kate picture?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we did have one panelist who wasn't able to join us today. We're very sad that Kate missed us, but everybody smile and wave and say, "We miss you, Kate."
We miss you, Kate.
Awesome, thanks, y'all. Okay, first question.
Hello. I really appreciate this panel as someone with pretty bad ADHD. So I find a lot of the time that I need what I like to call focusing distractions. So like doing low effort things on my phone, puzzles, fidgeting, etc. And some groups are fine with that, and some groups aren't. So I'm wondering if any of you have had any standout experiences, either positive or negative, with doing focusing distractions at different role-playing tables.
I'm going to take this one real quick. I think focusing distractions are awesome. It's helpful for the other people who are observing you do it, kind of understand why that's happening and make sure it's not distracting to them. I generally recommend against phones because there's so many other things that live in phones that can fully pull our attention away. And so things that are easy to pull your attention back, and also recognizing that sometimes our focusing distractions can become regular distractions, and just kind of having that conversation with people can sometimes be helpful. But things that are quiet, things that can't like play other videos or do other things that can really fully pull you away tend to work best for me.
It's much easier to sell a distraction when it is the only thing that distraction can do. Hence, we've been playing with these all day.
We're literally all sitting here with
so
photos
started for the whole panel.
under the table, and now I'm like, all
It's
right,
quiet.
you asked the question, so.
None of us were allowed to hold two at once because then it makes noise.
Oh, I have two. I was just sneaky.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say the thing that has worked best for me. I really like doodling. I will like doodle my character, or take doodle. I like doodled notes because I typed stuff when I was the Sherlock Holmes character on my iPad. But when I wasn't, I find that I'm taking notes and I'll do little doodles and stuff, which still keeps me engaged enough and still on track enough that coming back to the game doesn't feel like whiplash.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question.
thank you.
Hello. So I consider myself a baby ADHDer because I was just diagnosed 2 years ago, and
Welcome.
I'm in my mid to late
Yeah,
40s.
welcome. Yeah.
Better late than never, right? So one of the things that I've experienced pretty much my entire life, but did not know what it was until a few years ago, is severe RSD.
I was just about. I was like, ooh, I know where this is going.
To the point where when I'm at a table, even if I'm with people who know what I'm dealing with and know my triggers, if I'm talked over a lot or something like that, my brain shuts down because I feel like I don't belong at the table. Do you have, other than letting them know that this is a thing I experience, which they are aware of but sometimes miss, do you have any suggestions on how I can keep myself from resulting in a bad time because I'm lost in my own head in that respect?
Yeah, so we're absolutely not going to give individualized advice, but I can say generally speaking, for someone who might be experiencing those kinds of things.
Rejection sensitivity is what we were talking about, by the way, for anyone not familiar with.
Yeah, it really sucks.
What we generally advise is, talking to a therapist, getting that professional support, absolutely. Also, working on that general regulation or emotional coping skills. So this can include like grounding or stepping away from the table, having regular breaks, doing things during the day that can make you feel a little bit more focused. Also, having those reminders of that acceptance at the table. So that might be like things that you have written down about how you belong at the table and the last couple of times you've been awarded inspiration or whatever that looks like, so that you have those concrete reminders for your brain.
I'm a big fan of signals, and so like with friends and stuff, I did this once earlier, which means like, hey, I have something to say, so when you're done, this is to let you know that I have a thing, and I've got like other signals and stuff like that, and my husband and I are now starting some, that are like pretty much, I'm starting to get dysregulated. Without having to say, I'm starting to get dysregulated, just so that you can see the like internal gears are. Yeah, and this is also the like, thank you, Lindsay, which is the like, we go, wee, which means like, hey, we're getting off track. Let's like make sure we like bring ourselves back. And so if it's a table of friends that you are, comfortable with, coming up with some sort of visual signal to indicate what you're going through internally can be helpful.
You can also just like, if this is a group of people that you trust, having someone who is willing to just be like to do the signal back to you, because it's hard sometimes to do signals when you're already dysregulated. Just having someone who can check in and be like, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while in this game. Are you good? Like, do you have anything you want to say here? Just to have like someone else able to bring awareness to the fact that this is happening if you are indisposed and can't.
You are definitely not alone in that. Thank you so much for your question.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to lightning round, quick answers, because we have 4 minutes left.
All right, thank you for hosting this panel. I recently dealt with a situation where we've got a neurodiverse group. We're playing a game. We all know each other. We're close friends. Some of us have neurodiversity, some of us don't. But one of the players has started getting very verbally grumpy to the point where he will verbalize what he doesn't like, but it's in a way that's literally making everybody uncomfortable. And we will bend over backwards. So just any advice on that, and I'll sit down so the line can move. And thank you.
So here's the thing is like communication styles are real. And like, if nobody is willing to say, hey man, like, or hey lady, or hey you, the way you are addressing this is problematic, then it's going to continue to be a problem. And that can be really hard if you're not used to like being that assertive person. But sometimes it is okay, and this might be like #controversial, but it's also okay to ask players that like to leave the table. It's okay to say like, hey, maybe this game right now is not exactly what you need or what you're looking for. It sounds like maybe you need something else. If you don't want to leave the table, then we have to come up with a solution on how kind of this can work together. I'm a hyper communicative DM, so if somebody is consistently saying things that are the same, I kind of go, okay, well, we got to talk about this now.
Thanks for your question.
Hi. So if you have a game that's like very like role play heavy, and you have a character you really like who's a lot like you, but they are meant to be a genius, while you kind of are a little slower with processing, and some of the people like that I work with they love like really, really complicated plots, and it's like really great, but like then I'm trying to, or my character's trying to deduce things, and like they're like, oh, it's okay, you're doing fine, but me, again, like RSD getting in my head, and I'm like, oh geez, like I'm not smart enough for this, I'm not this, I'm not that, and it's a spiral. So if you've got like a really right there character and you're struggling with that, but you love the character, what advice do you have?
I would touch base with the GM to see if there's any kind of extra support they can provide, including like if the GM is willing to like maybe let your character in on a little bit more of the plot or some more information, provided it's consistent with who your character is and they're kind of on board with that. Just like they would if your character knew some secret information because of a backstory the rest of the group wasn't aware of.
Thank you.
Hi. So I'm wondering if, I can get really impulsive during some sessions, and I'll end up like really interrupting my other players a lot when they'll be like in the middle of either doing an action or they'll just be talking and I'm just like trying to finish their sentence and whatnot. Do you have any like advice on how to kind of respect another player's like space and to help me stop like interrupting them?
Doing the little signal to let people know that if it's a thing that you want to share because you think it'll, like the autofill thing, I also do, which is different than the I want to tell you a different thing. And so the signal for like, hey, I have something to say as soon as you're, done, versus the interrupting thing. The way that I kind of started to work on that is it is self-awareness, and when I noticed it, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, finish your thing," and the starting to notice and catch myself and apologize and tell them to finish their thing did start to build that habit for me.
It's absolutely awareness, and then that physical piece of like writing down your thought or writing down what you think they're going to say can help kind of build that space. So it gives your brain still a thing to do instead of interrupt.
It's hard when you get impatient. You're like, I know what you're going to say, and sometimes I'm wrong. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
We are out of time for questions. Thank you so much. We will be out in the hallway after this, and if you want to look through the anti-planner, there are copies in the Take This AFK room on the second floor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.